The modern world is filled with noise. Voices, images, demands, and constant movement shape daily life. Silence has become rare, almost threatening. Yet in the Christian memory of the Church, silence once became the place where truth was revealed. More than 16 centuries ago, a young man left everything familiar behind. He did not flee the world out of fear. He stepped away to confront it more honestly, within himself. His name was Anthony. This documentary tells the story of Saint Anthony the Great, not as legend, but as lived history. A man whose life in the desert shaped the spiritual path of countless generations. Anthony was born in Egypt around the middle of the 3rd century to a Christian family of means. He grew up hearing the scriptures proclaimed in church, absorbing them not as ideas, but as commands for life. When Anthony was still a young man, both of his parents died, leaving him responsible for his younger sister and a considerable inheritance. For a time, life continued as expected, but the words of the gospel remained active within him. One day, while attending church, Anthony heard the passage where Christ says, "If you wish to be perfect, go, sell what you have, give to the poor, and come, follow me." These words did not remain abstract. Anthony received them as spoken directly to him. According to the account preserved by Saint Athanasius, Anthony did not delay. He distributed his possessions to the poor, arranged care for his sister, and entrusted her to a community of virgins. Nothing was kept back. This act was not dramatic in appearance. There was no public announcement, no speech, no visible triumph. It was decisive precisely because it was quiet. Anthony then withdrew from the village to live a life of ascetic discipline on its outskirts. He learned from older ascetics who lived nearby, observing their way of prayer, fasting, and manual labor. At this stage, the desert was not yet absolute. Anthony remained close enough to receive instruction, correction, and support. Withdrawal was gradual, marked by discernment rather than impulse. What distinguished Anthony early on was not severity, but perseverance. He trained his body through fasting and labor, while guarding his mind through prayer and vigilance. The struggle was interior before it ever became visible. Saint Athanasius records that Anthony treated Scripture as daily nourishment. He memorized passages and recalled them constantly, allowing the words to shape his thoughts and actions. The gospel became his rule. As time passed, Anthony felt called to greater solitude, not because the world was evil, but because the inner battle demanded clarity. The desert offered no distractions, only truth. Anthony's withdrawal led him deeper into solitude. He moved farther from the village and eventually crossed the Nile to dwell in abandoned places on the edge of the desert. Here, silence became total, and with it came clarity and conflict. According to Athanasius, it was in this isolation that Anthony faced intense spiritual struggle. Freed from outward distractions, the inner battle emerged with force. Thoughts, memories, fears, and temptations confronted him directly. These struggles were not described as symbolic. Athanasius records them as real experiences understood by Anthony as spiritual warfare. The desert did not create the conflict. It revealed it. Anthony responded not with fear, but with endurance. He remained firm in prayer, fasting, and constant remembrance of God. Scripture became his weapon and refuge. At times, the struggle was so severe that his physical strength failed. There were moments when others found him wounded and exhausted, yet alive. He refused to abandon the desert, choosing perseverance over safety. Athanasius emphasizes that Anthony never attributed victory to himself. He understood endurance as cooperation with divine grace. Each trial deepened humility rather than pride. In these years, Anthony learned discernment. Not every thought was to be trusted. Not every impulse was to be followed. The desert trained the soul to distinguish truth from deception. Gradually, peace began to emerge. Not the absence of struggle, but inner stability. Anthony's presence became calm, his gaze steady, his speech measured. Word of his endurance spread. People began to seek him out, first hesitantly, then in increasing numbers. They did not come for spectacle, but for guidance. Anthony did not present himself as a master. He listened, answered briefly, and always directed attention away from himself and toward God. Authority in his life arose naturally from faithfulness. As visitors increased, Anthony chose even greater solitude, sealing himself within an abandoned fortress in the desert for many years. There, unseen, he continued the same pattern of prayer and labor. When he eventually emerged, Athanasius describes him as unchanged in body and serene in soul. The long-hidden struggle had formed him rather than broken him. Those who encountered Anthony sensed a rare clarity. His words were few, but they carried weight. The desert had stripped away what was unnecessary. What had begun as withdrawal became foundation. Without intending it, Anthony had become a reference point for those seeking God in sincerity. As Anthony's reputation spread, people from different regions began to gather near the desert. Some sought healing, others counsel. Many simply wished to learn how to live faithfully. What emerged was not planned. It was a response to a lived example. Anthony did not create a school, nor did he establish written rules. His guidance was given through short instructions, rooted in scripture and experience. He emphasized vigilance of the heart above external rigor. Central to his teaching was discernment. Anthony warned that not every vision or thought comes from God. Spiritual life required sobriety, patience, and testing. Haste, he taught, often concealed deception. He advised those who sought him to begin with humility. Without humility, even ascetic effort became dangerous. Pride, not weakness, was the greatest threat to spiritual growth. Anthony consistently directed his listeners back to the gospel. Scripture was not to be debated endlessly, but lived concretely. Prayer, fasting, and mercy were to be practiced with measure and sincerity. Although he valued solitude, Anthony did not despise community. He recognized that many could not endure total isolation. For them, life shared with others provided protection and balance. From this tension between solitude and gathering, early monastic communities began to form around him. Anthony remained their reference, not their administrator. Authority flowed from example, not command. Visitors noted Anthony's remarkable equilibrium. Despite years of severe asceticism, his body was not weakened beyond measure. His manner was gentle, his presence steady. Athanasius emphasizes this repeatedly. Anthony also spoke openly about fear. He taught that fear often exaggerates temptation. Confidence in God, cultivated through prayer, dissolves its power. When asked about demonic struggle, Anthony stressed sobriety rather than obsession. He warned against curiosity and fascination. Attention was to remain fixed on Christ, not on the enemy. His counsel shaped generations of monks. Without formal structure, a tradition took root, one marked by watchfulness, simplicity, and perseverance. The desert became a school of clarity. Anthony never claimed insight beyond his experience. When uncertain, he admitted it. This honesty reinforced trust. Wisdom in his life remained inseparable from humility. As years passed, his influence continued to grow, yet he resisted centralization. The desert was not to become a city. Its purpose was still purification of the heart. Although Anthony sought solitude, history drew him outward at decisive moments. During periods of persecution, he traveled to Alexandria to support imprisoned Christians. He did not seek martyrdom, but he did not hide from danger. His presence strengthened many. Athanasius records that Anthony moved freely among confessors, encouraging them to remain steadfast. He spoke simply, reminding them that faithfulness mattered more than fear. When persecution subsided, he returned quietly to the desert. Later in life, Anthony again appeared in Alexandria, this time to defend the faith against Arianism. He supported the Church's confession of Christ's divinity, lending moral authority through his reputation for holiness. Despite his influence, Anthony avoided public prominence. He refused ecclesiastical office and withdrew once his witness had served its purpose. The desert remained his home and school. In his final years, Anthony lived with a small number of close disciples. He continued the same rhythm of prayer, labor, and silence that had shaped his life from the beginning. No new method replaced the old. When Anthony sensed his death approaching, he gave practical instructions. He urged humility, perseverance, and faithfulness to the Church. He asked that his burial place remain unknown to avoid veneration of his body. Anthony died at an advanced age, having lived more than a century according to tradition. He departed quietly, as he had lived. His death did not mark an end, but a beginning. The way of life Anthony embodied spread rapidly. Men and women withdrew to deserts and solitary places, seeking the clarity he had found. From this movement, Christian monasticism took shape. Anthony did not invent monasticism, but through perseverance, he gave it form, credibility, and spiritual depth. The desert became a living witness to the possibility of transformation. His influence extended far beyond Egypt. Through Athanasius' account, Anthony's life reached the wider Christian world, inspiring ascetics across the Roman Empire. The desert spoke to cities. Anthony's legacy was not extreme asceticism, but discernment. He taught that the Christian life is a continual battle for clarity of heart. Victory was not dramatic, but faithful. The desert, in this vision, was not an escape from humanity. It was a confrontation with truth. What Anthony learned there shaped the Church's understanding of spiritual struggle for centuries. Saint Anthony the Great remains relevant because his life addresses a permanent human struggle. Distraction, fear, and divided desire did not begin in the modern age. They were faced honestly in the desert. Anthony shows that transformation does not come from novelty, but from perseverance. Silence, prayer, and humility reveal what noise conceals. The desert still teaches those willing to listen. His life reminds the Church that spiritual clarity requires courage. To face oneself before God is demanding, but it is also liberating. Freedom begins where truth is accepted. If this documentary helped illuminate the roots of Orthodox spiritual life, consider subscribing. Here, we explore the faith through lives that were lived fully and faithfully. You are welcome to continue this journey with us.